Yeah, I think it kind of starts with energy hygiene. I mean, I would say like I mostly work somatically, and it's about creating space.
Hmm.
Like you can imagine if your body is like a bottle and you want to have like your liquid, like you want like me in my bottle, then there's all these rocks in your bottle, so it reduces the capacity for your your authentic emanation of like like Gaia, Pan, beyond. So yeah, like I employ several modalities just to like create space for those authentic energies to come back in.
Welcome
to another episode
of
As
Woo As
You
Want with Jeremiah
and Celine and
Nobu-chan. How are you?
hello. Welcome.
Hey, Nobu. Well, hey everyone, welcome back. We're happy that you're back and enjoying the YouTube channel. And if you're not, watching on YouTube, we hope you're enjoying listening and continuing to listen. We are in February, and we have a special new guest for y'all. Someone who I actually know personally, who I've been wanting to connect with on the podcast for a while now, and we're super excited to have Nobu Hojimi-chan on the podcast.
Hey.
Hello. So I guess I have straight off the bat, how do you guys know each other? Etsy?
Great question. Yes.
Thank you.
So Nobu's previous name or concurrent name, Chris. Chris and I, I'll use the Chris name for the Etsy story. We worked at Etsy for a number of years together, and many moons ago. And and I've been connected ever since. We have like some mutual friends, and so we've been in contact here and there, and I don't even remember now, Nobu, and I really want to ask you about the name shift, because I think it's an interesting, right? It's just an interesting thing to chat about.
Sure.
But when was it that we connected, or when was it where did you? You know what? I'm not even gonna ask those questions. You kind of give us like a lay of the land of like where your journey has been since I've met you. And thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, like when. Thanks for having me. This all sounds really good. So, yeah, I think like we first met at Etsy. I was a software engineer, or maybe like I was probably a software engineer because I played more ping pong back then. We're talking tech stereotypes, archetypes, right? But yeah, I was a software engineer. I feel like Jeremiah had hung out more with the cool kids at Etsy, and I don't know what you would call it, like production, like video production, audio production.
Yeah, I was on the video team.
Yeah, and I was probably pretty annoying because we played ping pong right outside your room. But I apologize. But
I forgot about that.
Like I'm glad. All the energy when you're typing is in your fingers, right? And I feel like it is like a pretty funny tech stereotype, but I feel like getting embodied is a really good exercise for people who work on computers all day, which is pretty much all of us. But not to say we should all play ping pong, but I became a manager around 2013, 2014, started like taking care of teams, building products, burnt out, quit in 2017 to start a clothing company called Free Association, which I feel like is actually pretty close to what I'm doing now in a way. But we started to like run into roadblocks, and then COVID happened, so the factories closed down. They started producing PRP. I don't know. I can't remember what it's called. Personal protective equipment.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, it feels like ages ago now, right? But I feel like probably for a lot of us, like time has moved really quickly since the pandemic. But yeah, we started to run out of money. I started working at a company called Primary doing programming again. And then, you know, like the spiritual life kind of came for me. I guess I'm going to guess like a lot of people know what that feels like. And how to make it brief. Yeah, I just started out. I actually had like a really terrible knee injury, and I used to play soccer like 5 or 6 times a week, speaking of embodiment, but also free association and teams movement. And you know, that was pretty influential for me. I was like trying to play and recover, and then a mutual friend of ours, actually, I won't mention the name because I'm not sure how that works, but she introduced me to an acupuncturist in New York. And he really opened me up, got me into like some like Kundalini style meditations. I started reading the Tao Te Ching, which I think I read when I was like young. And it just started coming back, and I started taking Qigong classes with a guy in Bali on Zoom, which is pretty interesting. I started taking Bagua classes with a guy in New York, also over Zoom, which I feel like is monumentally energy shifting for me. I discovered like the traditions of the walkers of Bluestone or the wearers of lapis lazuli. Yeah, seems like y'all are familiar a little bit. And they're like born day fasters. So I started, you know, I found out like I was born on a Venus day during the hour of Mercury. Started fasting Fridays and Wednesdays, Sundays, pretty soon, all the days. And started talking to spirits pretty quickly. And
Interesting.
Right? I mean, yeah, go on.
Yeah. So okay. That's so interesting. So it was kind of the injury that was the catalyst, right? Because it led to the.
Yeah. I guess you could say like the injury was like the outcome of the catalyst of the injury, right? So, I've been doing. Yes, I mean, like, you know, basically like following guidance kind of like led me to different movement practices, you know, lexical practices like tropical astrology with Sabrina. And, you know, I think going into trance came pretty easily to me. So I just sort of like meditate sometimes for an hour or 3. One time on the summer solstice for like 7 or 8 hours, and I'll just have these visions of ancestry and how the experiences of my ancestors led to the experiences that I had as a baby, as a child. How it was interwoven with my living ancestors at the time, like my maternal grandfather and my paternal grandmother. And I feel like it's pretty easy to trace a path from like what happened to my ancestors to what happened to my knee, in a way, right? Which, you know, I'm really curious about. Celine, your acupuncture practice, Jeremiah. Like, some of the stuff we've talked about in DMs, but
yeah.
You know, like
it's so. I'm sorry.
Go on. No, please.
It's interesting that you're mentioning the ancestral aspect, because I was just in my I'm also studying hand analysis. You know, palmistry. And so I have this course every week, and it's been ongoing. And we were just talking about ancestral trauma and how you trace it, if you can trace it back 7 generations. And we incarnate into this life as, you know, as an opportunity to heal that, you know, karmic or ancestral stuff through ourselves. So I don't know, that just brought up that idea when you were talking about your ancestry. So where is your ancestry from? What are you working with? I mean, everywhere, but like, you know.
Yeah, Pangaya.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I feel like I've heard the seven generations thing, and like honestly, like in my practice, like I've only recently started to come into like an understanding of how ancestry like correlates or tessellates with cosmic ancestry, right? So I feel like, yeah, like seven generations ago maybe takes us back to like 1800s, but then some of the visions I had were like prehistoric,
Yeah.
maybe, I don't know, depending on how like rapidly our ancestors procreated, I guess. But
Yeah. I mean, it's also an interesting number, 7,
yeah.
So I know. It's wild stuff.
I've been digging into like three-way spirals and the 7 energy centers of the microcosmic order, the three lower the lower dantian, upper dantian, middle dantian, the pearls of the seas. It all makes total sense to me, but well,
those are references that completely went over my head.
Oh.
What you're saying makes total sense to me. I would say the totality doesn't make sense to me, but it's starting to make sense.
Yeah, totally. The dantians are an idea in acupuncture and acupuncture theory that you have three centers. Your lower is your lower dantian, your middle is like your obviously your middle, and then your upper. So you have three layers of. So, I mean, I get why that would go over your head.
Thanks for explaining. Yeah, but yeah, I guess like cosmically, my sense is that we have 7 energy centers as well. So we have like an earthly vessel, a cosmic vessel, and each of the ori, or like deities of those energy centers cosmically have incarnated on Earth many times, right? So I feel like that's the way that we get back, past 7 generations into like prehistory. And yeah, like ancestrally, I would say there's like 2 main streams. There's like Lemurians who kind of ended up in like the Malaya Peninsula, and like everything I'm saying right now came to me while I was in a trance, usually completely sober, but like when the Kundalini snakes start rising, we start producing endogenous DMT, right? So you could say it's like a natural high.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I've seen ancestors from Madagascar, Tanzania, Central Asia, and then like you also have the links to other branches of the tree, right? So I have Mongolian, what I would call like cautiously shamanistic ancestors who branched off from people who ended up in like Mesoamerica and Peru, and like the southern tip of South America. And like you can start to find traces which sort of hint at this. Like there are hints of matriarchal societies which were built based upon like honestly like a trade route between southern Africa and Hainan, Taiwan. So that's like the African to Taiwanese connection. And then like I think maybe everybody knows about like Denisovans and like prehistoric people who kind of like, I would say like, according to my lineages, originated in West Africa and then ended up in like Masala, like Marseille, Mediterranean, up into like Central Asia, across Siberia, and like into like East Asia, Northeast Asia, or like Central East Asia. And then ended up in like Japan, right? Like the Ainu, and then like people of Peru. And it's like you start to get into lineages, which I don't think people talk about, or you can't find on Google, and you're like, is that really like a thing, or am I imagining it, right? And I feel like probably most of us have been there, but I'm not sure if we all like necessarily talk about it because we're talking about literally the unseen. So, but that's kind of like, so like I end up connecting with teachers who have links to like people who call them in the astral, call themselves like red macaw people, of like, like the land of fire, in Southern America. I work with people in like Yoruba I work with like people who connected to like the Ascend, the Qumrani, and like the stuff that they bring in seems to correlate with the stuff that I bring in when I'm like in like a trance, you know. So it's not like true, but it like has function necessarily, and it's like true to my experience. It's true to their experiences, and then we release, you know, like we release tension in our somas.
So seems like you're very much in another world on a daily basis, huh?
I mean,
Like, what are
Brooklyn's,
your...
like kind of another world?
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
But on a daily basis, like, how do you interact with the world? Are you always kind of in like a trance state, kind of, you know?
Yeah, one of my friends on Twitter, her name's Whole Body Prayer. I think she's like in Fiji or something. Like, I mean, her name says it all, like Whole Body Prayer. I feel like that's a good description of my state. I said the other day, all body knowing, because it's like, it's different to prayer, right? So I don't know if you've heard the saying, but like I've heard that like prayer is kind of like setting intention or asking questions of like, you know, a vast power, not necessarily higher, but also like the earth is lower and much vaster. So it's just like setting intentions or like calling to spirits in some traditions. And then meditation's like receiving. So I feel like I'm always kind of in that state of like intending and remembering, sometimes dismembering.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, like I guess more concretely, like, you know, I'm like in Brooklyn right now. I've been like traveling around the country a little bit. I'll be traveling in the Southwest a little bit, but it's like very high powered land. And like, you know, like I lived in Brooklyn for like 11 years. So in order to
Oh, and so you're here now.
Yeah, so it's a long story, I guess. But like, yeah, in order to leave, like, are you both in like Brooklyn, New York?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like you feel like the pull away and like back towards New York. I don't know. Is that a thing?
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's a vortex for sure.
It's a hard place to leave. It's a hard place to leave.
It's a very hard place to leave. Yeah. And are you all familiar with like egregores or
No.
kind of like I would call it like thought, you know, like Taoist or Tao-ish traditions would call it like thought form complexes, and then some other traditions call them demons.
Do we live in a demon here? Sorry. I mean, you're like kinda.
No. I'm like laughing because I think it's like demon's a very strong word. And it's really funny because like I once read a paper on endogenous DMT, and like you know, it was like put out by like the NIH, the National Institute of Health, I think. But it's talking about how like DMT basically switches off the default mode network, and then it was like in letters like DMN, and I was like, But this is how I work a lot of the time. It's not very scientific, but yeah, I mean, like an egregore or thought form complex is like, I would say, you know, like every time we think some things, we like bind context to like whatever we observe, right? So it's like I see like Brooklyn, but I went and got a smoothie, so like now it's like Brooklyn smoothie. And then like you know, like in every moment that you're thinking, you could say that you like attach context to meaning, and that creates like a thought, and it gives, you know, thought a form. So that's why they call it thought form complex. And like you have all these thoughts coming together every moment for 11 years for me. And like, you know, you go back to like, I would say like you go back to like when people lived on the land of New York in a way which was disconnected from the land, as like maybe like an inflection point. But you start to see at that point a separation of like the land spirit and then like the thought form complex, because instead of people sort of like working with the land as extensions of the land to like be stewards or gardeners of the land, you have people thinking about other things like money, probably like lots of things, but ultimately like trauma based, right? And like, one of my friends, Talama on Twitter says, I think he said like thinking is a form of inflammation. I don't know if he got that from somewhere else, but like that reads to me, right? It's like we go to somewhere in our body, there's like trauma there, and then we go to our minds and we start thinking, and then we attach thought, we attach meaning to context, and that's how thought form complexes get larger and larger. So if you think about like going back to the settlement of New York, and then people like contributing ashe to this thought form complex, it's really big. And like if you think about New York compared to say like where I came from, Perth, Australia, like no one thinks about Perth, Australia. They probably listen to Tame Impala, but they don't know that he's from Perth or Fremantle. And like no one's thinking about it, all right? But like everybody's thinking about New York. They're watching TV shows about New York. So those people are also attaching ashe to the egregore. So then when you're here as a person in New York, according to me and my senses, my guides, it's like there's like almost like there's the land spirit, and then there's this egregore on top of it, and then you're interacting mostly with the egregore. And then when you try to leave the egregore, it's like, no, like I'm huge. All the money is here. All my friends are here. All the coconut lattes. You know what I'm saying? So like, I think, I'm sorry to make it too long. That's really
interesting. No. I mean, it's also, are they necessarily bad? Do you know, I mean, not like bad, but like, isn't that sort of how we function as a society, right? Like based on this egregore that we like attach to.
I love calling it egregore because it can be quite aggressive.
It's such an intimidating name.
It's like aggregatory, right? Like it aggregates. Like it's like Taoish people. I like to say Taoish because I don't like isms, but like Taoishism is like the idea is that because it doesn't have soul, like it doesn't have consciousness, and it's just taking like light, like ori from people. Like it's kind of like it doesn't have a choice but to like feed. So it's not necessarily bad, in many ways very good. Like it actually helps us maintain a society. But then like if you look at like the earth as it is now, you can kind of see how like a vampiric entity might go. Yeah.
She's pissed.
Yeah, because she's like right here and she wants to hold everything. But then like we have all these like egregores on top, which are like, if you move to like, the Catskills, are they going to have like really cool stores there? like silly stuff, right? Like it's not evil.
No. Well, I guess I was just thinking like, is it just a necessary function of our just, because wouldn't every place have one?
Yeah, I think
maybe some are nicer. Some are nicer. Better vibes.
I think that's definitely true. I love the way you put that. Yeah, definitely. It's interesting that you say place, because that's like I think that's like academically how some places tend to distinguish. But like there's the land and then there's the place, and it's like, yeah, if you go back to like the way people used to live on this land, it was not. I'm just getting pings, but I'm not going to talk about that. If you look at the way people live on this land, it was as an extension of the land, so they were the land.
Yeah.
And they were also in communion with the cosmos, right?
And, that's so true.
That's interesting that the Lenape people have come up back to back. Like this is the second episode where this idea of like New York and, living on native land and how we've, just built like right on top of it and kind of do not tend to it at all. How that's just come up again. I don't know. There's something to that, but so I'm curious. So Nobu, right now, you're practicing, you do energy clearing, right? Energy like hygienics. What would you say is your practice?
Yeah, I think it kind of starts with energy hygiene. I mean, I would say like I mostly work somatically, and it's about creating space. So yeah, if you imagine again like the land and then it being covered up by all these programs, and then like programs coming from our ancestry, past lives, even celestially, you know, like deities also need healing.
Hmm.
All that stuff, like from the context of like my lineages, is kind of like you can imagine if your body is like a bottle and you want to have like your liquid, like you want like me in my bottle, then there's all these rocks in your bottle, so it reduces the capacity for your, you know, your authentic emanation of like, you know, like Gaia, Pan, beyond. So yeah, like I employ several modalities just to like create space for those authentic energies to come back in. Yeah, like sometimes it's just like poetry, and then sometimes I'm like a lot of the time personally, I'm just like using like spontaneous qigong practices that, you know, I learned from the Taoist Light Institute in Santa Barbara, and like you just kind of like go into these poses and you end up stretching out like tendons, muscles, bones, fascia, and that creates space for your own chi to flow. And then, you know, like in Chinese medicine or like in indigenous medicine of the Far East, you could say like they would use their ki or chi to like move other people's chi. And like that's not really my practice. Like I tend to like try and like generally my practice is I'll set up a container, and then I'll set up containers for whoever I'm working with, and then I'll offer energies to their containers. So it's not like an incursion upon their energy, because that's bad energy hygiene, right? Yeah, lately I've been experimenting with just like helping other people get to, you know, because like I don't know if you noticed, Jeremiah, but like I've been doing like public sessions on Twitter Spaces because like something about the one-on-one dynamic didn't really sit well with me, and I also want to be able to like, you know, open up awareness in protected containers about like what is energy work, right? And then also like hold myself accountable, because like I'm like I really hope one day somebody in a Twitter space is just like, hey, like Nobu, like that thing you did there when you channeled light language from like Hariyalalia, like that I feel like I saw like a chord form between your container and the other person's container, and then I can like tap into that and like refine my energies, refine the energies of like Hariya. And that's another thing. And then, you know, like, so that's like kind of like one-on-one in front of like an audience, like in a container. And then like what I've been trying to work towards is like, okay, can you put that container and then have a third person there, and then put a container around those all those containers, so that like I can see like people doing reads on one another, or like just playing and just like offering refinements like energetically to their like fields, you know.
Oh, interesting. That's really cool. So yeah, let's see. I feel like I want to bring it down a little bit just for people who may not totally understand what you're explaining. But when you say container, it's almost like this is an energetic way of creating essentially like a place where energetically you're like safe and sound and blocked off from other people. Or it might be a porous container, but you're being very kind of direct about everyone's own energetic sovereignty, and that by doing that you're able to kind of play around with other people's, maybe play is the right word, you can work with the energies in ways that are maybe more accountable.
Yeah, and like the accountability, I would say, creates refinement.
Right.
Right. In a way, like, you know, integration, clearing trauma could be classified as or characterized as refinement. Right? Like we're just like getting rid of all of the rocks like in our bodies, so we can like flow. And you know, I loved like your description of that, because I mean, I love the word sovereignty. It just has like really great vibrations, or like soberania, like has incredible vibrations for me. But yeah, I would say like a container is a vessel, and a vessel flows, right? And like when you have flow, it's harder for you to attach, and it's also easier for whatever is ready to detach. So
I love
that's
that.
why, like, I think a lot of people say like holding space, right? So it's like you're holding space so that things can detach and then create more space.
Mm-hmm.
So are you doing one-on-one sessions anymore, or are you only doing the
definitely.
Oh, okay. So like walk us through a session, just so like people can kind of get a sense of like, okay, this is what I would experience, and this is what your practice is.
Generally, it's just in private. I'll talk about private sessions because it's like probably like the least weird or off thing, maybe. Because people don't really do energy work in public consciously. Like everything's energy work, right? Like even if you smile at someone, but like most people aren't being like, okay, let's do some energy work to the person at the bodega, right? But you never know. You never know. Do some meta in the bodega. While you're getting baracas, just slip a casual like rigpa terma on the counter. But yeah, generally I'll be a little bit late because I'm still like getting into current time, and then when I dial in with somebody, honestly, like I generally start setting the container like early. Like if I have an appointment on Friday, maybe if it's like some really deep stuff, I could start setting the container like 3 weeks earlier.
Wow.
And the reason I would do that is because basically like ancestors are trying to like send me stuff so I can like offer it to their progeny. Is that the right word? Progeny.
Mm-hmm.
Prodigies.
Mm-hmm.
But like, so it's like mostly like people, because they have all these like traumatic rocks, let's say, in their bodies, like they can't access like ancestry or like celestial guidance, let's say, or astral guidance. So they'll kind of like work through me, according to me, which is why I'm doing the public sessions, right? And like, so like people dial in, I'll ask them to tune into the container if they need shielding, because like I can feel that they're like starting to cord me already, then I'll offer shielding. And then, kind of like spirits start talking. If I'm working with like more like experienced practitioners, maybe they'll just be like, oh, I see blue. And then I'll be like, oh, that's interesting. Like, just ask questions. And the whole time people like guides are talking to me, right? And then at some point, I mean, sometimes it's like people like to talk about what's going on. Sometimes people are just like, they just want to ask you questions, right? But sometimes we talk, and then eventually, if it's like someone who's like very new to, let's say, like trauma integration, I'll just channel like light language, because that's like a very like broad brush way to just like clear things up. And then sometimes there's like all kinds of like self-healing practices that I'm able to like impart to people and like walk them through. And then also like they walk me through the way that they're receiving those practices, right? So like if I learned it a certain way and then I say like, what does it feel like when you see a bunny in a forest? And they're like, oh, like it's more like a deer to me. Then it's like a deer, But like I'd say like overall, does that give you like a sense of like, we didn't talk about light language. But,
talk about that.
It's so funny. You're on it, because that's literally like been in my head. You're reading it. I really want to talk about light language.
Have you been doing light language?
Me?
Yeah.
Probably.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Isn't this light language?
I would say this is like, I would say that I'm being told it's earth language, or like earth tongue, because like,
well, you're with a very earthy person.
It's totally earth tongue, and my what do you call it? My Mercury's in Taurus, so you have
and I'm a triple Capricorn,
Yeah.
Earth baby.
Perfect podcasting terroir, right?
So light language is like I don't know that much about it, but Jer and I have talked about it. I think
it was
previously. Yeah,
it was with Kim.
Yeah, with Kim.
Kim mentioned it. And when she mentioned it, sorry to interrupt, Celine, but when she mentioned it, it clicked because, you know, I follow you, Nobu, on Twitter and on Instagram, and I started seeing you doing, at least it looked like dancing, right? Like, or movement. And as far as I can tell, I was like, oh, I think that's what Nobu's doing. It's light language. And it just didn't make sense before. So I was just really curious to dive into it.
Like earth tongue is like with your tongue, right? And like you could say like in our reality, like cosmic beings don't have tongues. They're like spiritual energy. So I'd say like light language is about like kind of creating portals so that energy can come through. And that energy comes through in the form of like what you would call like a tone poem, according to like, are you familiar with like the Law of One and like the channelings of Ra?
Yes. Oh my God. I have the books. Jer.
Cool. Yeah. It's also online like for free if anybody, and it has like a linked glossary if anybody wants to look up like tone poems. But the idea is essentially like shapes come through, right? Like shapes come through, and the shapes have textures and feelings and colors and opacity and weight and sound and emotion. And then like I would say like the practice of channeling is about like being good at like matching those shapes to like earth symbols, like, you know, dancing or like art or music. And in that sense, I think it's true that like people are channeling light language all the time. I think that's the language through which like guidance comes. But then in that transcription from like light or like vibration to like words, movement, like all of our stuff gets in the way, right? It's like the smoothie I bought at the bodega gets in the way.
Yeah.
Did you have a smoothie this morning?
I might need a smoothie this afternoon.
That was no, but that was honestly a really helpful explanation. Like really excellent and well put, because yeah, it was just something I started looking at a lot more after that interview, just to understand it. But I really appreciate that, and I think other people will too, for sure. I'm sorry, Celine. I had interrupted you earlier, but I don't know.
Typical man behavior. Typical man behavior.
I was just eager to talk about.
No. It's totally fine. I mean, we're on the same page about it. I do, you know, I think I've been thinking a lot about the dualities of. Okay, let me think about how to phrase this. So we're human, right? We're human beings on the physical earth dealing with earthly things. And then at the same time, we're also experiencing other things like astral, celestial, etc. And, you know, I think it's a really interesting time in the world because on one hand, the world is on fire. It's garbage. There's so much trauma, so much bad stuff happening. But at the same time, I guess I'm struggling with the idea of when are you passive to the world and when are you active in it? Like, how can you actively contribute to the whole, to the betterment of the world by, you know, practicing meditation or all this stuff? But at the same, like, am I expressing this right? Like, I feel almost like there's this disconnect where you could like ignore, right? Maybe, and just like meditate and get your own kind of thing going on and be happy all the time. But then are you ignoring the other trauma? And like, this is what I've been thinking about. Any thoughts from either of you would be appreciated.
I'm still like marinating Jeremiah. So if you have any.
Oh, I mean, I I'm a Gemini. I'm ready to go. So, so
locked and loaded response.
Locked and loaded always. But no, I mean, I think it's a wonderful point. It's a very valid point. I think it's been something that is always been a discussion, whether it's right now with the way things have been and years since. But my understanding, at least, is even if when you're doing the work, when you're doing, like, Nobu is facilitating helping people clear out the rocks in the bottle, right?
Sure.
Let's use that analogy.
Okay.
If you're doing the work, if you're working with practitioners, if you're doing it yourself, if you're meditating, as you become a clearer vessel, as you become a clearer bottle, and more in flow, as Nobu was saying earlier, you are essentially, by healing yourself, you're healing everyone else. You are healing the world.
No, I mean, I totally agree with that, but I do think there's something that I struggle with a little bit about. It's almost the idea of like, can I like jump into a better reality and live in a space that's more wholesome and everybody's the whole is better, right? But then I'm like giving up this one, and like, because there's a lot of this that's like a privilege to do this kind of work, and like, I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm rambling. I'm earth tongue rambling.
I feel like you're going to some really great places, honestly. Like, it's just.
Thank you.
I feel like Jeremiah did a really good job of like describing kind of like the non-duality of like flow and goodness, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I feel like, like your question kind of made me want to talk about like dana, like offering. It made me want to talk about how everything is a soma, right? Like a body.
Yeah.
I feel like that's probably like the best place to start, like from my perspective. Is just like like I think everything that Jeremiah said about the body being a vessel is true of like the earth and of the sky and then everything, right? So it's just like, we're connected to those bodies, so when we start to flow better, then those bodies flow better, you could say.
Yeah.
I mean, Celine, to like counter that, there have been a few times, like at least in our lifetimes, right? We're all around the same age, where there have been like monumental turning points in good and bad directions. But like, kind of channeling like Bashar here, basically every like millisecond of existence, there's all sorts of earths, right? So I think the sense that you're feeling like, I think you're looking at it from a 4D perspective, where it's like,
no, I'm just feeling guilty. I think that's what it is.
Guilty about what? About being a healer?
Yeah.
I think there's something that's coming up a little bit of, I think like I feel, there's part of me that feels a little bit like I'm leaving everybody out, or like I'm not helping. I don't know how to explain it. I do think it's some sort of guilt thing. It's like a sticky feeling. Because like I'm with both of, like, I totally agree with both of what your perspectives and what you're saying. I just like, doing my own healing is like,
Sorry,
I don't know.
To cut you off.
No, please cut me off. I'm like digging the hole in this episode, I feel like.
That's good. You gotta dig deep to get all that ancestral trauma. I mean, when we're talking about the bottle and the rock, it's like also the bottle has like an empty bottom, right? So like I think you could maybe like a pipe is like a better way to talk about it. Or like maybe for me, I should probably stop talking about bottles. But like shamanistic traditions talk about becoming like a hollow bone. Like Taoists talk about becoming a hollow vessel for the cosmic interplay of earth and heavenly energy. But I mean, like in terms of like dana, I think that's where like this idea of like offering without knowledge of whether it's being received is like a component. Obviously, like that concept is super old, but then like we live in 2022, I think, so it doesn't quite work like that. So we do have, because like that happened in a time when people would just like leave something and then walk away, and then maybe the other people would leave something and then walk away, but we still have to like exchange currency for many things. And I think that's a big part of like what creates that stickiness. Like you have this part of you which is like, I want to help everybody, or I want to help everybody who wants to be helped, or etc. And then like you have this thing where it's like, but like I need to like eat, and I live in a super expensive city, and then like you have all these ancestors being like, the last time you gave that away for free, we died in a snowstorm. So it's like all of that stuff, and that stuff like comes up, and then it comes up in your life, and then like again, like going back to like the hollow vessel idea, or the hollow bone, that stuff gets stuck right in the bone. Like maybe like you like walk past the bodega and someone asked you for money, and you had $1 that was kind of like deep in your bag, and you were like, oh, I'm sorry, and then like you walk by and you get whatever, not a smoothie, and then like you get something, you do have money, and then like you have guilt, and then that like sticks, and then when that guilt is stuck, then anything which it will attract guilt, opportunities to like either detach it or accumulate more. And then that's from my perspective like where a lot of that comes. And then like I guess like sometimes when I'm working with people, they'll be like, oh, like if I'm not guilty about not giving money to like somebody who needs money, then like will they all starve? And it's like, in my experience, like when you release things, it's not that you stop doing the things that they asked you to do, you just do them more flowingly. And like going back to what Jeremiah was talking about, where it's like you have like bad things happen flowing into good things happening, flowing into bad things happening,
right? It's always going to be,
I would say, like that happens because of an accumulation, right? Like if you have like a dam and then like you detonate the dam, hopefully no one's planning on doing that anywhere, like all that stuff comes down and it just destroys the river like downstream of the dam, right? And you could say like that's why I think a lot of people will say like the road to whatever is paved with like good whatever, it's like I do this thing and it's good and I feel good about myself, and then like I gave money to the guy and then he smoked crack in the train, and it's like, and then you go like, and then it's like, no, like I'm never giving money again, and like then like and then people stop, and it creates this like and then like
it's a wild experience, I think, to just be here.
Totally.
Figuring it out.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like y'all see people, and you're figuring it out, and like you're providing space for people who are helping to help people to want to help themselves to figure things out. And it's like, I think everything you said about the fire and the garbage is like true. And also like, it's very true that like there are many, many people coming into their ancestral lineages, and I would say already working with their cosmic lineages, but maybe not working with ancestral lineages, or the other way around. And that can create like spiritual, like materialism, some people call it, or what I would call it is like dogma. Like instead of just flowing and like throwing out mudras in the middle of the street, like you're like, oh, like my doctor yogi told me to do this every day like 15 times and read the Heart Sutra at 3 p.m. And it's like, yeah, that's like all good stuff, but it's that thing where it's like, oh, if I read the Heart Sutra and I'm in like the middle of a super primeval forest, then I'm going to open myself up to all of the trauma that was received when that forest like was destroyed by earthquakes and lava flow, and then you're like, and then you're still reading the Heart Sutra because like the land is like, oh, like your heart needs to be bigger to receive all of the trauma of this land, and then you might like disintegrate, not like physically but like spiritually.
Yeah, it's a delicate dance. It's a delicate dance, I think.
Yeah, and I think I'm really appreciative of like, like I think every time I'm going through one of those things, and I like recently went through something super like tectonic, I'm like really grateful. Well, not in the moment, I'm just like trying to hang on, but like, afterwards, you like, first of all, you come into all these lineages and your ancestry, and that, that kind of gets to like my name changing, you could say. But then also like I'm really grateful for the teachers who came before and like did way wackier stuff than I did. Like I was like battling egregores, archangel egregores in the astral and beyond, but they were like getting stabbed in caves. Or like kept in caves. Like many shamanistic initiations would just, would involve just being put in a cave, maybe with like psilocybin for like 9 days, 9 months, 9 years.
Oh my God. I don't know if I'd make it. Psilocybin in a cave, just me?
Yeah, that sounds rough.
And all the spiders that you're imagining, right? Like, not
oh my God. So when did you change? When did the name change happen? Just like in the last year or two, or?
It happened in the last couple of months. So like, Jeremiah probably knows I changed my name. My born name is, it's like Christopher Zhongji, but my matrilineal ancestral name is Ho. But, I had this spiritual thing, and then like shamanistic lineages started calling me, and cosmic lineages, which had seeded shamanistic lineages, started calling me. And they asked me to call myself Red Star Green Cloud, which represents like certain, to me, Atlantean deities and like archangelic entities. And like they were like really driving super hard because my patrilineal ancestry is like brutal. Like they are like people who would like initiate their shamans like that, and sometimes their shamans would jump off cliffs and they'd be like, oh, okay, like bad one, So
wow.
Like the capacity, or like you could say like the things that they were telling me were coming through like a very traumatized lineage from the perspective of 2022. So like maybe like say like the Red Star and the Green Cloud were like, oh, like Red, I was going by Red at the time, needs to like clear this thing, and the patrilineal ancestors like lock him in a cave. Or they like send him into battle with like what the teachings of Michael would call like twin flames, but like not romantic twin flames necessarily, but like even like adversarial cosmic lineage dismembering twin flames, right? So I was like doing a lot of stuff with lineage holders. I mean, it's controversial because I'm talking astrally, right? Like lineages come over and they're like, hey, go read this, and like I would say that's like an astral lineage connection. But like astrally, I would say like I was getting like nudges from like the Pluavians, and then those cosmic lineages had at one point like worked with humans to create like shamanistic lineages, and my ancestors were born in those lineages. So then they kind of like created almost like this like suction effect, right? And that suction kind of created flow, which worked its way through all the trauma. And then once I was able to stabilize again through like some of our common friends, Jeremiah, and like my partner Desi, and like some teachers that I stopped talking to, like nobu emerged, right? And like nobu, I'm just like tapping in to see if I should talk about it. Maybe I should just leave it there for now. But
okay.
Yeah, I mean, God, that's like a lot. That's a lot to handle.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that kind of goes towards like healing those lineages as well. It's like, like why did you think it was cool to do that kind of thing? It's like, well, we had to because we were battling against the other warring states during the Bronze Age.
Right.
And they would send warlocks after us. So like even if people weren't ready, like they would end up like battling astrally with these warlocks from different tribes, or like certain imperializing lineages, which I'm being advised not to talk about, right? But they would do like they were taking like termas, they were taking gifts, they were distorting them through the lens of dogma and like idolatry, and then they would like mobilize armies of like dogmatic astrally equipped warriors, and they would come after the lineages that they had taken from, often like many centuries later. And then those shamanistic lineages would send their shamans up against those people because they had to. And then some of them went crazy, and some of them just like were super sick, like just really dope. And it worked for them. So that's kind of how that lineage got there, according to me.
Yeah.
And it is really heavy and it's super spacey, and I'm trying to like ground it like in like what's available on Earth right now, you know, but hopefully it makes sense.
It makes sense. I'm with you.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's, you know, it's one of those things where like the people who listen to our podcast are a wide range. So I think there are going to be people who more tapped into it and people who might be a little less tapped into it. But
I mean, I'm in. I love all this. I love this stuff, you know?
Spiritual self-defense is a thing that people don't really talk about as much as we should, I think. You know, like to me, it's kind of like primary, you know?
Yeah. I think it's more, maybe a little bit more now, or maybe not. I don't know. I think also, you know, whenever you're doing any kind of energy exchange, it's important to be aware that you're doing that and to kind of, I mean, I talk about bubbling up all the time, you know, I've talked to Jer about it too.
we've talked a lot about like courting.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like shielding and like being able to tell when you're being courted is like very, very close to like the first things that I feel like, you know, my lineages want me to teach at least. Or not teach, but share or offer.
Yeah.
It's tricky.
Yeah.
I mean, that was huge for me, and it's one of those things where like and we've talked about this on the podcast, but like as you become more kind of energetically sensitive, that comes up. It's almost like one of the first things you are confronted with, and it's a very, very helpful thing to learn how to manage. Otherwise, you know, you're consumed by it.
Yeah, and sometimes by luck, right? And sometimes by necessity. And then sometimes you even avoid it by necessity, I feel like. I mean, like one of the earliest conversations I had, Jeremiah, with you, I mean, can I share?
Yeah.
Like, these things are happening. I know you, and like, I don't know how I felt. I mean, like, I think I listened to As Woo As You Want, and like that, I think it was like the Abdi Asadi episode, actually. And I was like, hey, like, and then like, you know, you put me, I think you like let me know about like some of your teachers. And then I was like asking my guides, and I was like, should I do this? And they were like, no. And it's like, well, if I had done that then I probably wouldn't have ended up having the kind of openings that I ended up having later, which was super traumatic. But like, that's my path. And I think, like I was saying, like, I'm so grateful for my teachers who like went through most more terrible things. And then like, you know, they emerged with wisdoms and compassion and kindness and love and honestly like martial artistry. And like they shared that with me, and I was equipped. Like it was a terrible 4 or 5 days, but I was equipped. Yeah, I mean, like I feel like sometimes there are a lot of people who have like a lot of like sensitivity who they don't even know they're being attacked. Right.
Yeah.
And like I think, yeah, go on, Celine.
Oh no, I was just taking a deep sigh.
I mean,
my
answers
MO.
are kind of like, it's a good MO. It's a good vibration. But yeah, I'd say like my ancestors are kind of like hard ass, and like I'm grateful for that.
They seem pretty hard ass.
Yeah. And like I think you're kind of lucky in some ways. That's a heavy thing to say. I mean, like it forces you to develop better self-defense mechanisms. And I feel like, you know, Jeremiah and I talked, and like it was definitely like coming up for me out of necessity. Jeremiah, I don't know if you want to talk about it, but like your experiences with spiritual self-defense.
Yeah. Oh no. I mean, I have spoken about it for sure.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just one of those things where like, you know, the resources that we have right now in 2022, I mean, are better. You know, you can, you know, you're very active on Twitter, and there's like a community there, you know, which is wonderful. Cause like imagine having, not that community. And the way our society, American society particularly, has been structured is not, we don't have ways to handle these kinds of occurrences and energies. And, people get thrown in the psych ward or, whatever. And it's unfortunate, but, I think kind of to your point, Celine, about like, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's pretty crummy right now, but, this is like I feel like Nobu's another example of we've interviewed a few people now on the show who like, this pandemic has catalyzed a change on this earth. And like, I think more and more people are waking up. Yeah. And we are experiencing a shift of some kind.
No, hold on. I would like to reiterate a point here. I'm not like down in the depths feeling like super shitty about stuff. It was mainly just an idea, like a thought that had crossed my mind about reality meshing. Like
reality meshing.
Thank you. That's a great word. Reality meshing, just meshing realities. And I think because of the pandemic, because of all the energies that are more active and time is moving faster, that there's a speeding up process that's happening that is just really fascinating to witness and to be part of. And like, I am very grateful to be able to experience this with all the knowledge that I have presently, that I'm carrying from all my like ancestors, my witch vibes, all that stuff. I'm psyched. I just, I feel very compassionate towards people who are suffering right now. And I just want to help them. That's all. That's all I mean. And some people don't want it, right? Like it's a choice. So
that's, yeah. I mean, I think you're definitely doing that, Celine. But yes, it is a choice. And I know, but you had mentioned something along those lines earlier, like whether they're willing to be healed. Mm-hmm. It was something that Abdi said where it's like, there are people who come to healers and they're like, I want to be healed. And then you like show them and they're like, oh, no. I don't want to be healed. Because it's so intense. It's so, it's a lot. It's literally just confronting everything, the shadow. Just you looking at that mirror. But Celine, you're totally doing it.
Thank you.
And so is Nobu.
So are you.
Like we're doing it. I feel like we're doing it.
So where are you going after? Where are you going? Where are you going to next? What egregore?
Which place? I mean, I think like the specific. I think the specific place is probably like somewhere upstate New York. I have to like go pick up my van, which is the whole story. From like the Southwest, but then I get to drive across and see some friends, probably some spiritual friends, probably some friends who don't know they're spiritual, and then some who will be or were. Some Mercury stuff, psychopumping from Jupiter in the Northeast to Earth in the Southwest, or Venus, depending on which mythologies you follow or give a shade to. I think I do think we're really fortunate. I mean, like, it's kind of like, I feel you, Celine, because it's just like the things that people experience are horrible and they're like super terrifying. And yet the lineages that we're remembering are super dope, right? Because it's not just like my ancestors hang out in caves in Central Asia, but then like I'm working with people from like Nigeria, and the time zone's like not even that bad compared to like Australia work, right? But like, and like, it's like, like the people who came up with the I Ching share, I know people like Yoruba people who work with the I Ching. And then they also have all these other practices, like some really powerful stuff and then some really compassionate stuff. And then my lineage just has stuff and we just like trade. So like, when I mentioned putting together a container for a session, like often that's what's happening. It's just like I'm opening it up and it's like, okay, I have like sensorial traction is like how I would call it on my customer, my clients feel, like, whoever I'm working with. And then their ancestors like beep, beep, beep. And then like my guides, my ancestral guides and my cosmic guides and their cosmic guides just like have this like swap meet in the sky. And it's just like super sophisticated, what I feel like at the time for me, maybe that'll be blown away at some point, but they feel like very robust, resilient practices. And then those practices are helping people to break free of programming, which causes like the trauma and like the psychosis, or what people would call psychosis.
Yeah.
So it's like,
yeah,
I think so.
big vibes, big vibes.
It never
big
gets
vibes.
old.
No,
It never gets old. Like you're always learning, right? And like you're like, I'm meeting people and like their stuff is super cool and they're really unique. And you start to see how the pieces come together, or you could say like the threads start to ravel or unravel to re-ravel. And then you can start to see like the seeds of like a higher consciousness earth egregore, you know?
yes, that's sick. Earth egregore. This is my
Because there's always
favorite
going to
thing.
be an egregore. We're gonna think,
Yeah.
we're gonna have thoughts, right? And hopefully,
Yeah.
like to me, like it's about like how do I translate what's coming through from above, and how do I translate what's coming up from below? And that's when I think, you know. But then there's like,
Yeah.
I think to another point you brought up, like in that superstar question, right? Like the question was just like, was like, how do you know if the practice is like leading you to or away, or like just like stagnating? And I think it's like, to me, it's still about that. It's just like, are we like relating to the energies of like heaven or the cosmos or like land or Gaia? Are we like relating to the unified energies of Pangaea or the unified energies of like Sophia Christ, right?
Yeah.
And then there's the opposite, where like there are some lineages who I won't name with sounds, where it's like, okay, like don't think. I guess I did name them. But like, don't think, and you're like, I'm here thinking about not thinking, and like the whole time you're just creating this like titanium container which blocks out all of the energy, because right, like you're gonna have thoughts when you're receiving light language from Sekhmet. You're gonna like have thoughts when you're receiving energy from like Vesuvius, because like it's gonna come up and you'll be like, what's that? And you're gonna be like, that feels like warm, feels hot, feels like lava, feels like salt. And you know, to me it's like about like sensing into experience and not like desensitizing with thought. That's just like potentially controversial, but
No.
Really interesting.
so yeah,
Yeah. It's
I
like,
I rattled some cages astrally.
no.
Those ancestors are still there. They still think they can come through like the Dothraki on horses and just like take back what was taken. You know, but yeah, sorry.
Well,
I'll do it later.
Oh my gosh. I don't know. There's so much. This was so rad.
Yeah, I really
Yes.
appreciate y'all holding space, and if I may say, like our ancestors and our cosmic lineages, and the earth, and Pan.
Pan.
Do you have anything else you want to share?
I mean, like so much. Like I feel like Celine as well, and probably you as well. And you've done such a good job of holding space for my rambling. But I would say, like, you know, I do these public sessions on Tuesdays, and I'll start doing them on Wednesdays instead of one-on-one, but with one-on-one-on-one, or like one-on-two or two-on-one. And then eventually on Thursdays, I'm hoping to do like two-on-two, like one-on-one-on-one-on-one, but more like martial stuff. But I don't have all the pieces for that. But yeah, if you like, you know, follow, you know, y'all, then I feel like
I'll link
maybe
you.
you'll get to, you get to see, and I feel like that's better, like experiencing versus like me barambling. And then like you'll meet people that I work with like in the community. And,
On
like,
Twitter.
building
Is this Twitter?
on
Twitter.
on Twitter for now. It's not super encrypted, but you know, it's where a lot of people are.
I'm going to check it out. So this Tuesday coming up.
Yeah, I'd say like on Tuesday, I think I have a couple booked, but like usually I'll do it during the Mars hour of Mars Day because it's like martial. Um,
Yeah.
Love
and we're
that.
also trying to teach Mars how to be artful and not necessarily like
Rude.
artful. Rude.
Yeah. Mars is just an aggro energy, you know?
Yeah, like right now. And then I mean, can I talk about the astrology egregore? Probably not, I won't. But like, you know, there are like astrology egregores which distort our perception of the energies.
Wait. Oh, okay. I don't know time wise, but like mine just like popped.
I am kind of curious though.
I want to know. Okay, we don't have to.
If you
Can I say
need to
one
go,
thing about it?
yes.
I'll say that the zodiac was fixed by Ptolemy to like the northern hemispheric seasonal calendar, and there are many astrological traditions that commune directly with asterisms and stars, like, you know, Jyotish or Jyotisha. It's just like, it's not like Virgo. It's like, oh, like Speaker separates these asterisms, so they're communicating directly with Speaker, and that's like how they, from my understanding, that's where they like start to structure like that egregore. And it's like, again, like you're saying, egregores aren't bad, like they can help us, but then they can become misaligned, and then they can start to like get in the way.
So that's why you do tropical?
I don't, I mean,
Oh, you don't?
I'm actually I feel like we're trying to figure something else out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Enough
we'll talk
said.
about it, I'm sure. Sorry.
Mysterious, and I like that.
I like that. I think that's a good
That's a good end.
end.
We're
Yeah.
working on something.
We're working on something. Cliffhanger.
It was a good means. I appreciate you.
Yeah.
Thank you. No, thank you so much for sharing your time
Yeah.
and your experience and your wisdom and your ancestors' wisdom. It's really been a wonderful call.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very
So,
much.
likewise.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah. So thanks everyone for
I could
listening.
Thank you for a while.
Oh. Wait, what? Namaste.
I was going to say I could thank you for a while, but I'll just keep on thanking you.
And check them out on Twitter.
Yeah, we're
I'm
gonna
gonna
link.
do it.
We're gonna link
it. We'll link it.
everything, and I've got a lot of work to do. There were a bunch of references dropped, so I've got my work cut out for me. But and you might get some DMs, Nobu, from me if I don't know a reference. But yeah, everyone, thank you so much for listening in, and Nobu, thank you so much for sharing your time, and we'll see y'all on the flip side.
Thank you.
Bye.